He looked at me with those same, familiar eyes I used to fall asleep to every night, the eyes of the man I thought I'd grow old with, but today, they were cold, detached. His voice, once so full of warmth, now sounded as distant as the world I no longer recognized. "Emily," Liam began, his voice steady but strained, "I've made up my mind. I need you to sign the divorce papers. It's time for us to go our separate ways." His words hit me like a cold wave. I wasn't surprised after all. I had known for a while now that this day would come. But hearing him say it aloud, seeing him sit there, calm and composed, was another blow altogether. I had known about the mistress. How could I not? The late nights, the secretive phone calls, the lies he fed me about work trips and business meetings. But it wasn't just her that was tearing us apart, it was the fact that Liam had lost his way, lost the man I had once known. He had turned into someone I didn't recognize. And yet, here he was, expecting me to roll over and accept it. "Emily," he continued, his words cutting through my thoughts, "there's someone else. Someone who understands me. She's not like you. She's different." I nodded, fighting to keep my composure. I couldn't let him see how much his words hurt me. Not anymore. Not when I had already made my decision. "Do you love her?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly despite my best efforts to hide it. Liam looked away for a moment, and for the briefest second, I thought I saw a flicker of guilt in his eyes. But just as quickly, it was gone. "I do, and I need to be with her, Emily." The words stung, but I didn't let them show. Instead, I just nodded. "I understand." In that moment, something inside me snapped. I had spent years of my life trying to make this marriage work, bending over backward to meet his needs, ignoring my own. But in the end, it wasn't enough. And now, after everything, he was leaving me for someone younger, someone who didn't have the baggage of a failed marriage hanging over her head. I had played the part of the devoted wife for far too long, but now, it was my turn to take control. I reached for the divorce papers in front of me, my hands trembling. But this time, it wasn't from fear, it was from the weight of the decision I was about to make. "Fine," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'll sign the papers." Liam's face softened, and he reached for my hand. "Emily, I'm sorry. This isn't easy for me either." I wanted to pull away from him, to slap his hand away and tell him to get out. But I didn't. Instead, I looked at him with an expression he would never forget. "I'm sorry too, Liam. But you've made your choice. And now, so have I." As I signed the papers, I felt a strange sense of release. It was over. Our 7 years together, all of it, reduced to a few signatures on a piece of paper. But what Liam didn't know was that I had already moved on. I had someone else, someone who wasn't like him, someone who saw me, really saw me, in a way Liam never had. The man I had been with for years had forgotten who I was. But the man I had found after all this time, Henry, he saw me for exactly who I was. And as I signed my name, I couldn't help but feel the first flicker of freedom in a long time. The moment the divorce papers were signed, something inside me shifted. It wasn't relief exactly, but more like the beginning of a new chapter, a new journey that was finally within my reach. The air around me seemed to clear. The weight that had been on my chest for years now lighter than I could remember. Liam sat there, his eyes still glued to me, as though expecting some kind of emotional breakdown, some outpouring of tears or rage. But instead, I remained calm, controlled, pretending like I didn't care at all. But deep down, I knew something he didn't. I wasn't broken. I had already found someone else. His name was Henry, the prince of the Henry family. Our first encounter had been purely accidental, a chance meeting at a bar where I happened to be watching a fight. He caught my eye, and when I made an offhand comment about young people's energy, he responded with a suggestive remark about wanting to take that energy to bed. It was impulsive, bold, and at that moment, I didn't care. It felt good to feel wanted, to feel desired again. From there, we began a tangled mess of passion, with Henry pushing and pulling me into his world, and me trying to keep it at arm's length. He wanted more, but I was careful. I wasn't about to make the same mistakes again. I wasn't about to fall for someone who could make me feel small, insignificant. No, Henry was different. He didn't need me to be anyone else but myself. But what he didn't know, what no one knew, was that I had been playing a game all along. I wasn't just trying to heal from the pain of Liam's betrayal. I was trying to make sure that I came out on top. And Henry was going to be the tool I used to do that. I didn't expect to fall for him, but slowly, I found myself drawn to him. Not just for his body or his wealth, but because he made me feel alive again. Unlike Liam, Henry actually paid attention to me. He cared. He didn't play games. But the fact was, Henry had his own motives too. He wasn't perfect, and I knew it. But he was there when I needed him, and that was more than I could say for Liam. Now, sitting across from Liam as he waited for me to have some kind of emotional meltdown, I couldn't help but smile inwardly. What did he think would happen? That I would beg him to stay? That I would crumble at the thought of him leaving for someone younger, someone more beautiful, someone without my baggage? No, Liam had underestimated me, underestimated my strength, my ability to survive, my capacity to move on. The truth was, the last few years had been spent preparing me for this moment, the moment I would finally take control of my own life, of my own future. I wasn't going to let him or anyone else define who I was. Liam watched me in silence, his gaze flicking from my face to the divorce papers, then back to me. "Emily," he said, almost hesitantly, "I really thought we could work things out. I thought you'd understand." Understand what? That he was a liar? That he had been cheating on me for years, hiding behind the illusion of a happy marriage while sneaking around with someone else? That was the part that hurt the most, the betrayal of trust. Not that he found someone else, but that he thought I would just accept it. That he could throw me aside like some broken toy and move on without any consequences. I looked at him, really looked at him for the first time in a long while, and what I saw wasn't the man I had married. It wasn't the person who promised to love me forever. What I saw was a man who was too weak to confront his own mistakes, too selfish to care about anyone else but himself. "It's too late, Liam," I said, my voice steady but firm. "You made your choice, and I've made mine." He blinked, as though the words had stunned him. Maybe he thought I would beg him to stay. Maybe he thought he was irreplaceable in my life. But he wasn't. I had already moved on. "Emily," Liam began, but I cut him off. "No, Liam, you don't get to speak now. I gave you 7 years of my life, and you threw it away for a fleeting affair. You chose her over me, and now I'm choosing myself. It's over." For a moment, there was a strange, almost uncomfortable silence between us. It wasn't the silence of reconciliation, though. It was the silence of finality. The silence that marked the end of something that should have never started in the first place. I signed the last of the papers and stood up. I didn't look back. There was no need to. Liam stayed seated, his face drawn, like a man who had lost something precious but didn't quite understand why. I could almost hear him thinking, "What have I done?" But it didn't matter anymore. I had nothing left to give him. He had used up all of my love and patience over the years. Now, I had nothing left but the drive to move on and rebuild my life. And I wasn't going to waste any more time on someone who hadn't earned a single second of my time. As I walked out of the room, I felt a strange sense of peace wash over me. It was time for me to live for myself, to stop being defined by my marriage, by the mistakes I made in the past, by the man who had broken me. Now, I was Emily, not Liam's wife, not anyone's second choice. I was ready to live. The door clicked shut behind me with a sense of finality, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I could breathe again. Walking out of that house felt different from every other time I'd left it. There was no lingering sadness, no guilt weighing down on my chest, just the quiet echo of my own footsteps, steady and resolute. As I stepped into the car, I glanced at the phone in my hand. Henry had been texting me nonstop. I had put him on pause for the last few days, too wrapped up in the whirlwind of divorce to think about anyone else. But now, with Liam out of the picture, I realized I didn't have to wait anymore. I unlocked my phone and tapped on his message, "Missing you. Let's celebrate tonight. Just us." A small smile tugged at my lips. Henry was a force. His persistence, his undeniable attraction, the way he had inserted himself into my life. It wasn't what I'd expected, but it was exactly what I needed. I felt his presence as I arrived at my apartment. There was no rush to answer his texts, no pressure to make decisions quickly. I had time. I had space. I was free, and it felt good. I made my way inside, my heart racing as I opened the door. I hadn't seen him in person since the last time, but the thought of him still sent butterflies fluttering in my stomach. It wasn't just his looks or his confidence, it was the way he made me feel. Henry didn't want anything from me. He was raw, unafraid, unapologetic. He lived for the moment, and in a way, he made me live for the moment too. That night, we went out. Henry took me to a place I hadn't been before, a lavish bar on the top floor of a skyscraper, where the city stretched out below us like a sea of twinkling lights. It was beautiful, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel weighed down by the past. The air felt lighter, more promising. Henry kept glancing at me, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. "You know, Emily," he said, his voice low, almost teasing. "I've been thinking about us. You know you don't have to keep pretending. I'm not like him. I'm not going to leave you hanging. I'm here for real." I met his gaze, my heart beating a little faster. Was he serious? Or was this just another game to him? But something in me shifted. I didn't need to ask for promises. I didn't need him to say the right things. Because, deep down, I already knew. Liam had broken me, but Henry made me feel alive again. "You're not like him," I agreed, my voice soft but filled with certainty. "But I'm not looking for a savior, Henry. I'm not looking for someone to fix me. I just want someone who understands that I'm okay on my own." Henry smiled, leaning in a little closer. "I get it, but I'm not leaving you to fend for yourself either. Whatever you need, Emily, I'm here." His words were comforting, but I wasn't ready to dive into anything too deep just yet. I had a long road ahead of me, and rushing into a new relationship wouldn't heal the scars of the past. But as I looked at him, at the man who had quietly supported me, without asking for anything in return, I couldn't help but wonder, could I let myself fall again? That night, I went home with him, not out of desperation, but because I felt seen. Henry didn't try to fix me, and he didn't ask for anything in return. He simply accepted me as I was, a woman who had been broken, but was now slowly piecing herself back together. As we stood at the threshold of his apartment, his eyes searched mine. "Are you sure about this?" he asked softly, his fingers brushing my hair from my face. "We don't have to rush." I wasn't sure of much anymore, but I was sure of one thing. I wasn't running away from what I wanted. I had already let one man dictate my life. I wasn't going to do it again. "I'm sure," I whispered, my voice steady. We stepped inside, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. The next few days passed in a blur. I was no longer the woman chained to her past, afraid of what would happen next. Instead, I was learning to be the woman I had forgotten about, the woman who was powerful, independent, and ready to take the world by storm. The finality of the divorce had given me a kind of freedom I didn't realize I was craving. Liam had tried to call me the day after the papers were signed, but I ignored his calls. I wasn't angry anymore, just indifferent. His voice no longer had any power over me. He had made his bed, and now he had to lie in it. The truth was, I had no more room for him in my life. I had been patient long enough. I had been understanding, even when he didn't deserve it. But now, as I moved forward, I realized something. I wasn't the one who needed to change. He was. And as I watched the sky from Henry's balcony, I felt the weight of years of self-doubt lift from my shoulders. For the first time in years, I was breathing free air. It felt like a rebirth, a beginning. The days that followed my divorce were a whirlwind of emotions I hadn't expected. I was no longer trapped in the suffocating weight of my past, yet it was hard to ignore the impact of the years spent trying to fix a broken marriage. The transition wasn't as smooth as I had hoped. Old habits, old fears, still lingered in the back of my mind, clawing at me in quiet moments of weakness. But the one thing I learned through it all was that I was capable of more than I had ever imagined. I wasn't broken. I was evolving. Henry was a constant presence now, someone I could turn to whenever I needed. Not in a clingy, possessive way, but in a way that allowed me to heal, to breathe, without feeling guilty about it. He never asked for anything from me, only for my honesty, and in return, he gave me space, something I hadn't had in years. Still, I was cautious. Even though Henry had proven to be different from Liam, I wasn't about to rush into something serious. He was everything I had needed in the aftermath of my heartbreak, supportive, fun, and spontaneous. But deep down, I knew I wasn't ready to dive into a full-blown relationship just yet. I needed time. The last thing I wanted was to make another mistake and repeat the pattern of my marriage. I wasn't going to rush to prove something to anyone. But I wasn't fooling myself either. I wanted to keep Henry in my life. Maybe it was because of the way he made me feel, or maybe it was the way he looked at me as if I was the only woman who mattered. Whatever the reason, he had become my anchor, But as much as I enjoyed the newfound freedom, a part of me couldn't shake the nagging feeling that I hadn't fully closed the door on my past. I couldn't ignore the fact that Liam was still out there waiting for a chance to redeem himself, to make me believe that he had changed. And every time I thought about him, about our history, there was a hollow ache in my chest. I didn't want to be the woman who went back to someone who had hurt her. I couldn't, not after everything I had fought for. One evening, as I was getting ready to meet Henry for dinner, my phone rang. The name on the screen made my heart drop. Liam. I hesitated. My fingers hovered over the screen, and I thought about ignoring it. I had no desire to speak to him, but a part of me, maybe out of old habit, or maybe out of a lingering curiosity, pressed the answer button. Emily. Liam's voice was softer than I remembered, almost desperate. Can we talk? I sighed, the weight of his voice dragging me back into a place I had worked so hard to escape. Liam, we've already talked. You wanted the divorce, and I signed the papers. There's nothing left to discuss. But there is, he said, his voice thick with something I couldn't quite place. I know I've hurt you. I've been an idiot. I was wrong, Emily. I made a mistake. I clenched my jaw. He sounded sincere, but his words were empty to me now. He had said the same things to me before, promising change, promising he would be better. But in the end, it was always the same. His promises meant nothing. His words were just tools he used to manipulate me. I've heard it all before, Liam. Your apologies don't mean anything anymore. You don't get to walk back into my life because you realize the grass isn't greener on the other side. You made your choice, I said, the bitterness I had tried to suppress slipping through. Emily, I love you, he said quietly, almost pleading now. I know I messed up. I've been miserable without you. I'll do anything to make it right. Please, just give me another chance. I could feel my pulse quicken, a mix of anger and frustration building up inside me. How dare he? How could he sit there, act like everything he had done was just some fleeting mistake, like he hadn't torn my heart apart over and over again? No, I replied firmly, my voice shaking with a force I hadn't known I still had. I'm done, Liam. I don't need you anymore. I have my life back. You can't just waltz in and expect me to forget everything you did. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and for a moment, I thought he might say something else, something to make me change my mind, to guilt me into going back to him. But instead, when he spoke again, it was quieter, almost defeated. I understand, he said, and there was a sadness in his voice that cut through me, deeper than I expected. But just know, I'll always love you. I hung up the phone, not giving him the chance to say anything else. The moment I did, I felt an odd sense of relief. It was over, really over. As I turned to leave my apartment to meet Henry, I felt an overwhelming surge of clarity. I wasn't the woman Liam wanted me to be anymore. I wasn't the woman I had been when we first met. I wasn't the victim. I was someone new, someone who had learned to stand on her own defeat. I knew I wasn't ready for the future just yet, but one thing was certain: I was no longer afraid to embrace it. I could choose who I wanted in my life. I could choose the love I deserved. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough. I walked out of my apartment, my heart beating steadily. The night air was cool against my skin, but inside, I felt warmer than I had in years. The night was quiet, almost too quiet. As I drove through the city to meet Henry, I couldn't help but replay the conversation with Liam in my mind. His words still echoed in my ears, but this time, they no longer held any power over me. It was almost as if he had been a ghost in my life, haunting me for so long, and now that ghost had finally disappeared. When I arrived at the restaurant, Henry was already there, waiting for me. His back was to me, his broad shoulders relaxed, the way they always were when he wasn't trying to impress anyone. I walked up to him, and he turned with a smile that immediately softened the edges of the day's tension. Hey, he greeted, his voice low and warm, like a blanket wrapping around me. You look beautiful. I smiled back, feeling a flutter of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Thank you, Henry. As we sat down, I couldn't help but notice the difference in this moment compared to every other one I had spent with Liam. There was no pretense, no expectations, no hidden agendas. With Henry, There was just honesty, raw, unapologetic honesty. We spoke casually at first, about work, about our days, but I could feel something deeper stirring beneath the surface. There was a tension in the air, a magnetic pull that I hadn't fully acknowledged until now. I had been so focused on putting my past behind me that I hadn't really considered what was right in front of me. Henry had been patient, kind, and understanding, but there was something else there too, something I hadn't allowed myself to explore. Emily, Henry said suddenly, his voice quieter now. I don't want to rush you, but I need to know something. I care about you a lot, and I'm not asking for anything right now, but I need to know if you feel the same way. Are we just passing time, or is this something more? I looked at him, his gaze steady, unwavering. I could see the vulnerability in his eyes, something he didn't show often. And in that moment, everything clicked into place. I wasn't just using him to fill the space that Liam had left. I wasn't just with Henry because I wanted revenge or because I wanted to hurt Liam. I was with Henry because he made me feel whole. He made me feel seen. Henry, I started, my voice low and deliberate. I'm not sure where this is going yet, but I know one thing. Being with you feels real. I haven't felt this way in a long time, and I don't want to rush into anything, but I think we should just see where it goes, together. His smile spread across his face, and for a moment, the world seemed to slow down around us. The weight of my past was still there, lingering, but now it felt like a distant memory. Henry was a step forward, not a way to fill the void. We spent the rest of the night talking, laughing, and enjoying each other's company without the usual weight of expectation hanging over us. And for the first time in months, I let myself truly enjoy the moment. The next few days passed in a blur of new beginnings. My life had changed in ways I never could have imagined. I wasn't just divorced. I was free to make my own choices, free to be who I truly was, without the constraints of a relationship that had defined me for so long. But the moment I had been avoiding finally arrived. It was the day I went to the office, to Liam's company, the day I officially took my place in the very company he had once tried to control. The board had agreed to my proposal, and with my 50% of the shares in the company, I was now in a position of power. But as I sat down at the table for the first meeting, I couldn't help but feel the weight of the responsibility on my shoulders. This wasn't just a victory for me, it was a symbol of everything I had overcome. The meeting was tense at first. Liam's absence was palpable, and I could see the discomfort on the faces of the board members who had once looked to him for leadership. But now, with my presence, the atmosphere had shifted. I wasn't there to play games. I wasn't there to appease anyone. I was there to lead. As the meeting progressed, I found myself taking charge, making decisions that I had once left to Liam. I could see the surprise on the board members' faces, but I didn't let it shake me. I knew what I was doing. I had worked hard to get to this point, and I wasn't about to let anyone stand in my way. At the end of the meeting, I received a message from Henry. It simply read, "Proud of you," and I smiled, because I knew that no matter what happened in the future, I had earned this. I had fought for it, and most importantly, I had finally found my strength. The next few weeks were a blur of decisions, changes, and adjustments. I wasn't just managing the company, I was shaping it, and I was shaping my future, one decision at a time. But as I stood in my office late one night, looking out over the city, I realized that I had never been more content. For the first time in years, I felt in control of my own life. The past was no longer my anchor, it was my foundation. It had shaped me, yes, but it was no longer who I was. I wasn't Emily, the broken wife. I wasn't Emily, the woman who had been cheated on. I was Emily, the woman who had built herself back up, the woman who had survived. And for the first time in my life, I was proud of who I had become. As the weeks passed, my life began to settle into a rhythm I had never imagined. I was no longer just a woman recovering from heartbreak. I had become someone who embraced her power, her choices, and the future she was building for herself. There were no more late-night phone calls from Liam, no more moments of self-doubt, and no more feeling like I had to be anyone other than myself. But just when I thought things were starting to look up, the past had a way of creeping back into my life, like a shadow waiting to be acknowledged. It was late one afternoon when the email arrived. The subject line simply read, "Meeting request, Liam." My heart skipped a beat. I had expected him to move on, to find some way to justify his actions with Grace or anyone else who would tolerate him. but I had never expected him to come back into my life like this. The email was brief. I need to meet with you. We need to talk. Can we meet tomorrow at AM at the office? For a moment, I hesitated. I didn't owe him anything. I had built this life without him, and I was proud of it. Why would I give him the time of day? What could he possibly want after everything? But then I remembered. I wasn't afraid anymore. I had already taken control of my life, and I wasn't going to let Liam or anyone else dictate my choices. I knew I couldn't ignore him. I had to see him face to face, not because I needed closure, but because I needed to prove to myself that I had nothing left to fear. The next morning, I walked into the office with my head held high, my heels clicking purposefully on the marble floors. As I approached the conference room, I saw Liam sitting at the table. He was dressed sharply in a suit, his hair neatly styled, but there was something about him that seemed different. For the first time, I saw him not as the man I had loved, but as a man who had lost everything. Emily, he greeted me, his voice soft but tinged with something I couldn't quite place. Guilt? Regret? I couldn't tell. Thank you for meeting me. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I took a seat across from him, keeping my posture relaxed but confident. What do you want, Liam? He seemed to pause, as if he were gathering his thoughts, but I could see the unease in his eyes. It was almost as if he wasn't sure where to begin. I know I've hurt you, he said finally, his voice thick with regret, and I don't expect forgiveness. But I can't help but feel like I've made a huge mistake. I was stupid, Emily, and I was blind to what we had, to what I was throwing away. I raised an eyebrow. Was this real? Was he truly feeling remorse for what he had done? Or was this just another one of his manipulative tricks? You're right, I said, my tone calm but firm. You were blind, and you were stupid. But you didn't just throw away a marriage. You threw away trust. You threw away loyalty. And those aren't things you get back just by saying sorry. His face softened slightly. I know, and I'm sorry, but I need to ask something of you. Emily, the company, it's not the same without me. I'm asking you no, begging you to reconsider. You don't have to bring me back in completely, but maybe you can let me have a part in this again. I've learned from my mistakes, I swear. For a moment, I let his words hang in the air between us. Part of me wanted to laugh. Part of me wanted to scream. How could he think that after everything, after the lies and the betrayal, I would just let him back in? Did he honestly believe that he could redeem himself in my eyes just because he was asking? You've already had your chance, I said quietly, my voice steady. You had your chance, Liam, and you blew it. I'm not your second option. You don't get to come back into my life when it's convenient for you. That's not how it works. His eyes flickered with something hurt, frustration. Emily, please, but I wasn't done. No, Liam, you don't get to be the victim here. You chose her. You chose a life outside our marriage. And now, you have to live with the consequences of those choices. I'm not going to let you manipulate me anymore. You've done enough damage. It's over. Liam was silent for a moment, his face hardening. I could see him struggle with the weight of what I was saying, but I wasn't backing down. He had burned every bridge between us, and now he was asking me to rebuild it. I wasn't foolish enough to think that he had changed. Is that it then? He asked, his voice tight. No chance for reconciliation? No hope for the future? I shook my head. You had your chance, Liam. I'm moving on. You need to do the same. The words were final, a declaration, and I knew that for the first time in years. I wasn't looking to the past anymore. I was looking forward, to my future, to my success, to the people who truly saw me for who I was. Liam's face fell, but I didn't feel any satisfaction in his misery. In a way, I almost pitied him, but that was all he was to me now. A man who had once been a part of my life, but no longer held any power over me. As I left the conference room, I felt a strange sense of peace settle over me. For the first time in ages, I didn't look over my shoulder. The past was behind me, and I was no longer afraid of it. I had chosen my future, and with Henry by my side and a company to run, I had everything I needed. I was done with the lies, the manipulations, and the broken promises. I was finally free. The weeks following my final confrontation with Liam were filled with a sense of finality that was both liberating and unsettling. I had always wondered if I would ever find the courage to sever ties completely, to truly move on from the man who had been a constant in my life for so long. But now that I had, it was like I was seeing the world through a new lens, a lens that wasn't clouded by betrayal, resentment, or the fear of being alone. The board meetings at the company became easier as the months went by. The staff, once divided and uncertain about my role, now looked to me for leadership. I wasn't just another figurehead. I had earned my place. I made the decisions, and I made them without hesitation. But as much as I thrived professionally, there were moments of quiet reflection where I still questioned my choices. Not about the divorce, not about the career I was building, but about my heart. Henry had become a steady presence in my life, and despite my initial hesitation, I was beginning to realize that I cared for him deeply. He was supportive, patient, and he had given me the space I needed when I had pushed him away. But there was always that lingering question in the back of my mind. Was I ready to open my heart again? One evening, as I sat in my office, going over financial reports, my phone buzzed with a message. It was from Henry. "I'm on my way over. I need to see you." A warmth spread through me as I read the text. I had missed him more than I cared to admit. I had spent so much time running away from my past that I hadn't allowed myself to truly embrace the future. When he arrived, I found him standing in the doorway of my office, his face serious, but his eyes filled with something deeper, something that made my heart beat faster. "Emily," he said softly, stepping into the room, "I need to talk to you about something important." I stood up from my desk, instinctively feeling the weight of the moment. "What's going on, Henry?" He walked over to me, his gaze never leaving mine. "I've been thinking a lot about us, about what we've been through. I know we've both had our share of pain, and I'm not trying to rush you into anything, but I need to know if we have a future." His words hung in the air like an unspoken question, one I had been avoiding for weeks. My chest tightened as I realized just how much I had grown to care for him, how much I had come to rely on him not just as a man in my life, but as a partner, as someone who truly saw me. "Henry," I began, my voice shaking slightly, "I care about you, but I'm scared. I've been through so much. I'm not sure if I'm ready for something real again." He stepped closer to me, his hand gently cupping my face. "Emily, you don't have to be ready for everything at once, but what I want, what I need, is for you to let me in. Let me be part of your future." I stared into his eyes, searching for any sign of doubt, but all I saw was sincerity. And in that moment, I knew that this wasn't just another rebound. This wasn't just a way to fill the void left by Liam. Henry was here because he cared about me, because he wanted to build something with me. "You've already let me in, Henry," I whispered, my voice barely audible. I just didn't realize it until now. His smile was slow but filled with such warmth that it made my heart flutter. "Then let's build something together. No more looking back, no more doubts. Just us." I leaned in, the hesitation finally gone, and kissed him gently. It wasn't a kiss of desperation or of trying to forget the past. It was a kiss of new beginnings, of trust, of everything I had longed for but had been too afraid to reach for. As we pulled away, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I didn't need to know the future. I didn't need to rush things or have everything figured out. All I knew was that I wasn't alone anymore, and I didn't have to carry the weight of my past on my shoulders anymore. For the first time in years, I truly felt free. The next few months were a blur of progress professionally and personally. My role in the company continued to grow, and Henry and I found a rhythm that worked. We didn't rush things, but we built something real, and it was enough. Liam, on the other hand, seemed to disappear into the background. The company had moved on without him, and as the months passed, his presence seemed less and less significant. The betrayal he had caused me was no longer a fresh wound, it was just a scar, something that had shaped me but no longer defined me. As the year drew to a close, I found myself standing at the edge of a new chapter, one that I had written for myself. A chapter that was filled with hope, with love, and with the promise of something better. I wasn't Emily, the woman who had been cheated on, the woman who had been betrayed. I wasn't defined by my past anymore. I was Emily, the woman who had rebuilt her life, the woman who had learned to stand tall, the woman who had learned to love herself first. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of what came next.